Hello everyone and welcome to another video on this old PC. I was recently given a bunch of old PCI expansion cards, with 4 of them being Sound Blaster cards along with a single USB 2.0 card. I'll be testing each of these out using the Packard Bell iConnect PC, along with trying out an AGP graphics card that I have. Now to start with, I wanted to try out the USB 2.0 card. This probably doesn't sound that exciting, but the PC has USB 1.1 ports built in. There is a noticeable improvement in transfer speed with USB 2.0, but this card would make file transfer much quicker, if it works of course. I did try researching the model number online to see if I could find any info about the card, but it just came up with pressure sensors and controller boards. Not really what I was hoping for. Thankfully, I was able to find the information about the onboard VIA chip. It's a generic part that's used in lots of different USB cards. Anyways, to get the card installed, I unplugged the PC, took off the side panel, unscrewed one of the PCI brackets, and realised I removed the wrong one. The top bracket is reserved for an AGP card. Whoops. After unscrewing another bracket, I was then able to insert the card into the first PCI slot on the motherboard, with the 4 USB ports accessible at the back of the PC. I then plugged it in, pressed the power button, and nothing. No signal on the screen. Not even a beep. The PC was on, but it was stuck here. I did power it off and back on a couple of times, but it made no difference. Great start. I decided to take the card out and brush the contacts just in case it wasn't making a proper connection with the PCI slot. After reinserting the card and plugging the PC back in, it booted up just fine this time, which was a relief. When Windows finished booting, I checked Device Manager and the card was being recognised. Looks like Windows already installed the appropriate driver. I then plugged a USB drive into one of the ports on the card, only for nothing to happen. No device insert sound effect, no autoplay pop-up, and even worse, no lights flashing on the USB drive itself. Great. And no matter what port I used, the USB drive just wasn't being recognised. I knew this USB drive was working, so I figured it wasn't being recognised because of a driver problem. I went on my main PC and downloaded Snappy Driver Installer Origin, and I then inserted the USB drive into my PC, copied and pasted the zip file to it, and ejected the drive along with the USB wireless adapter. I then went over to the old PC and inserted the USB drive and wireless adapter into the built-in USB ports. Then I extracted the files for SDIO. This zip file is only 6 megabytes. Further proves how slow USB 1.1 really is. When that finished, I opened SDIO and downloaded driver indexes. But unfortunately, it did not find an updated driver for the USB card. I also tried restarting the computer just in case that would help somehow. But nope, USB devices simply weren't being recognised through the card. I did discover that the USB ports were at least providing power though. I plugged in my USB desk lamp and it turned on just fine. So I guess the card was half working. It wasn't transferring data, but it was at least providing power. At this point, I felt it was necessary to unplug the PC and remove the USB card once again. Maybe the contacts needed a proper clean to allow the card to make a good connection. I got some isopropyl alcohol, a few cotton swabs, and dipped a swab in the alcohol. Then gently wipe the contacts on each side of the card. After doing this, the contacts looked much cleaner than before. I let the card dry for a minute and then reinserted it into the PC. Third time lucky maybe? I plugged the PC in, booted it up, inserted my USB stick, and it was recognised by the computer. The card was now working, it just needed a proper clean. I did a quick test by copying an 89 megabyte file to the desktop, and it copied within 10 seconds. Nice. It's worth mentioning that the same file takes 2 minutes to copy through the built-in USB 1.1 ports. Pathetic. Imagine how long it would take to copy a few gigabytes. Anyway, I spent a little while testing all 4 ports on the USB card to ensure they all worked fine. I even plugged in multiple devices at once, and there weren't any issues. The only slight troubles I had were with this USB optical drive, which usually works on any system I use it with, but not the USB card. It would show up on the computer when plugged in, but I couldn't eject it, and the green light would just flicker constantly. There wasn't even a disc inserted. Weird. Maybe the drive requires more than 0.5 amps to work properly? That is the power rating for this card according to the properties. Again though, all other devices I tried worked fine through this USB card, including my USB drives and the wireless adapter. I could copy files without them getting corrupted or lost, and I could browse the internet just fine. Now, moving on to the 4 sound cards. I decided to try them in release order, the first one being from 1999 and the last one from 2004. Please don't consider these reviews or anything, I'm only testing these cards briefly to see if they work. First, here is the Creative Sound Blaster PCI 128, model CT4750. Seems like this would be a decent budget sound card for Windows 95 or 98 era gaming, but not for MIDI playback, judging from what I've read online. I got another bracket removed from the back of the case, inserted the sound card into the second PCI slot, and finally plugged the speaker cable into the green output port on the sound card. Then I plugged the PC in, powered it on, and when Windows booted, there was no sound whatsoever. It also wanted me to reboot to finish installing the new hardware, which didn't fix the problem. The sound card was showing up in Device Manager though. Maybe it wasn't selected as the default device in the audio properties? Oh yes, turns out that was it. I switched the device to Creative Sound Blaster PCI, and the sound was now playing through the speakers. Great. How about the MIDI playback? Oh yes, I forgot this sound card doesn't have FM synth support. I did notice you can choose the Sound Blaster card as the MIDI device, but the funny thing is it outputs nothing when selected. It wasn't muted or anything, it genuinely does nothing. I even went into SDIO and tried updating the drivers, including both the sound card and the Creative Game port. But after installation was complete, the system rebooted and everything was the same. Except I could no longer use the Sound Blaster as the MIDI device at all. Okay. Again, it doesn't really matter anyway, as this sound card is apparently lacking in MIDI support. The main thing is the card was functional and was outputting sound just fine in every game I tried. None of them require MIDI support, so I guess it's no surprise. Moving on to the second sound card, the Sound Blaster Live 5.1 Digital model SP0220 from 2002. A much better looking sound card than the previous one. Will it sound better though? I ended up putting the USB card in the second PCI slot and then inserting this Sound Blaster card in the top PCI slot, just to make it a bit easier when it comes to swapping the cards out. After powering on the PC, I realised I forgot to plug in the audio jack. Oh, whoops. I quickly fixed that while Windows was booting, and then went into Device Manager to see if the card was being recognised. Annoyingly though, both the Sound Blaster and USB cards weren't showing up now, as if they didn't exist. I unplugged the PC, removed both cards and reseated the USB card first, which, after booting into Windows again, resulted in this. This device cannot find enough free resources that it can use. Then it disappeared from Device Manager. What? I was starting to think the USB card was defective, but before jumping to conclusions, I tried wiping the contacts with isopropyl alcohol again like earlier. And that seemed to resolve the issue. After some further testing, the USB card seemed to be working again, which was a relief. Now, back to the Sound Blaster card. I got it inserted into the PC once again, plugged it in, and this time it was detected, though Windows couldn't find drivers for it. No big deal since I could just open SDIO and download the drivers from there. After the process was complete, the Sound Blaster card was appearing in the audio properties, along with a few of its own MIDI synthesizers. I opened some MIDI files to test the playback, and it sounded good. I did notice something a bit odd when playing games though. In this specific example, depending on the angle I was facing, the sound effects would become slightly muffled. I only noticed this when playing Robot Wars, and I have no idea if it affects any other games. I don't own many PC games myself, so it's difficult to test. Aside from this slight problem, sound was working just fine through this Sound Blaster card. I'm happy with it. I like the sound of the MIDI synthesizers too. In fact, here's a quick comparison between the default Microsoft Wavetable and the Sound Blaster Live synthesizers. The game shown is Mahjongg Master 2 from 1998. Next up is the Sound Blaster Audigy 2 model SB0240. Certainly the biggest Sound Blaster card here, with plenty of functionality, including 2 audio inputs, 3 audio outputs, CD audio in, SBDIF, and even a Firewire port. What more could you possibly want? Well, a chip that doesn't corrupt itself? Seems like these cards had ROM corruption issues, which is just fantastic. Hopefully this one will work fine though. I inserted the card into the PC, and it was so big that it was touching the floppy drive connector on the right side of the motherboard there. A tight fit for sure, but not really much of a problem. After inserting the audio jack, powering the PC on, and booting into Windows, it tried installing the appropriate drivers. But it failed to find some files that were needed and wanted me to insert a CD that I didn't have. I'm not sure why this happened though, as I thought Windows was installing the driver automatically. Never mind. I cancelled the installation and opened SDIO once again to download the drivers from there. And once that was complete, the sound card was working. Looks like it also has the same MIDI synthesizers as the previous Sound Blaster Live card. It even had the same issue in Robot Wars where the sound effects sometimes went muffled depending on where I was facing. Weird. Honestly, this sound card seemed to be the same as the previous one, but with lots more functionality. It also works just fine, and I'm pleased with it. It's a shame I can't test most of its other features though, as I just don't have the necessary audio hardware. Oh well. Finally, here is the Sound Blaster Audigy SE model SB0570, possibly the most underwhelming one despite being the newest out of the 4 I've shown. Not only is it smaller and low profile, but it has far less features to offer. Doesn't mean it's bad though. I got the card inserted into the PC, but I couldn't get the bracket screwed in. It was stuck facing outwards, which prevented me from inserting the screw. Never mind. After booting into Windows, it failed to find appropriate drivers, so I got them from SDIO, which then allowed the sound card to function. It didn't appear to have any MIDI support though. Only the Microsoft wavetable was appearing in the audio properties menu. Aside from that, it was playing sound just fine, both when playing games and using Windows. Nothing else I can really say about this card. Seems to work alright. No! How? How did I lose to Revolutionist? Overall, I'm happy with all 4 of these Sound Blaster cards. They all seem completely functional, and each have their own unique features. I've actually decided to keep the Sound Blaster Live 5.1 digital in the PC for now, as it has a decent number of ports, the MIDI synthesizers sound good, at least in my opinion, and the card isn't too big, unlike the Audigy 2. Now, before I end this video, I'm sure some of you are wondering, why don't I try putting a graphics card in this PC? And that is a good idea, because this motherboard does have an AGP slot specifically for graphics cards. Conveniently, inside the spares repair Packard Bell iMedia PC that I bought a couple of months ago is an ATI Radeon 9200, an AGP 8X card from around 2003. I have no idea if it works because the motherboard in this specific PC is dead, but I think it is worth removing the card from this dead PC and inserting it into the working Packard Bell computer to see if it's an improvement over the NVIDIA integrated graphics, which naturally it should be, right? Before I get too ahead of myself though, let's run some benchmarks on the integrated graphics first. I used a very old version of Fraps to benchmark each of the games shown here. The results will be used to compare with the ATI Radeon 9200 later. To start with, a game that I've shown too much of lately, Robot Wars Extreme Destruction from 2002. The game is set to 640x480 resolution, with shadows off and quality set to low, or 1. The menus run at a stable 60 FPS, but once you start an Annihilator battle with half a dozen robots in the arena, expect to see frame rates averaging below 20 FPS, and even as low as 10 whenever there's lots of fire or smoke on screen. Evidently, the integrated graphics seem to really struggle with particle effects. These results are generally consistent across different arenas and game modes. The game isn't unplayable by any means, but it certainly isn't very fun with this poor frame rate. And keep in mind, the graphics quality is set to low. Next, I tried Toka Race Driver from 2003. Resolution was set to 640x480, with the graphics set to a mix of low and medium with high textures. This resulted in consistent gameplay that was a solid 30 FPS most of the time, but it would sometimes dip to 20 FPS, usually if cars were sliding across the track or crashing into stuff. Overall though, it looks good and is fully playable. Finally, I ran a default benchmark on 3D Mark 2000 at 1024x768 resolution. Surprisingly, throughout each of these game tests, the frame rate was often 60 FPS or above with low and medium detail. Tests with high detail, however, would slow down to around 20 to 30 FPS. Still, I'm impressed with how well the integrated graphics handled this benchmark. There were some tests that had to be skipped though, likely because of the lack of a dedicated GPU. And after the benchmark was completed, the system scored 4617. I guess that's good, considering this is integrated graphics we're looking at. But these frame rates and scores can be improved with a proper graphics card, right? Let's get the ATI Radeon 9200 GPU installed and try it out. After inserting this graphics card into the AGP slot on the motherboard, you can clearly see the inside of the PC was getting very busy, with all 4 available slots being used up. Let's see if the ATI Radeon 9200 graphics card will work. I plugged the PC in and booted into Windows, with the display drivers being installed automatically in the background. I opened GPU-Z to check out the info of this graphics card, and when comparing it to the NVIDIA integrated graphics, you can tell that this ATI Radeon is far better in virtually every way, with DirectX 8.1 support and 256MB of VRAM, as opposed to DirectX 7 support and 32MB of VRAM. But how well did this ATI Radeon 9200 perform with 3D graphics? Well, spoiler alert, it didn't. This isn't because it's a bad graphics card, but because my specific one turned out to be broken. I tried going into Device Manager to check driver info, and then the system froze completely with no input being accepted from the mouse and keyboard. Already a bad sign. I force powered off the PC and rebooted it. Maybe Windows was unstable because the drivers had only just been installed? After a reboot, Windows seemed to be stable this time round, so I tried running a benchmark on 3D Mark 2000. And it ran completely fine. For about 1 minute, and then most of the screen went black. And for some reason the screen output changed to 56Hz instead of 60Hz. Then momentarily the entire screen went blank, with the PC freezing completely once again. And the whole system's froze again, yay! At one point I tried updating the drivers, but after starting a battle on Robot Wars Extreme Destruction, this happened. Yeah, this graphics card is cooked. Even going into the BIOS and changing the AGP clock to 66MHz instead of 100 made no difference. The PC was just extremely unstable with this graphics card inserted. I should mention that the motherboard in this PC supports AGP cards up to 4X, while this ATI Radeon 9200 is an AGP 8X card. But after doing some research, 8X cards are apparently supposed to work with motherboards that only support 4X. Not sure if there's some weird incompatibility going on with this graphics card or if it's just broken. If you think you know what the issue is, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm also open to suggestions on how I could fix it, if possible. For the time being, I've removed this graphics card from the PC and I'll be sticking with the mediocre NVIDIA integrated graphics. It's a shame, but I can always try a different graphics card later. In fact, Russell, a helpful viewer, has pointed me towards this NVIDIA GeForce 6200 AGP graphics card, which supports DirectX 9 and is actually better than the ATI Radeon 9200 I was trying previously. On a more positive note, if we ignore the graphics card disaster, this Packard Bell PC has been improved considerably with a USB 2.0 card and Sound Blaster card. Many thanks again to Joe for sending these PCI cards over. I appreciate it, and this video probably wouldn't have happened otherwise. And one more thing, thank you all for 1000 subscribers. I still can't believe how quick this happened, and I'll continue to create more tech and video game content for you to enjoy. I'm still planning to make a 1000 subscriber special video where I attempt to install lots of operating systems onto this 22-year-old PC, using suggestions from a previous video. Thanks for watching, and please consider checking out more content on my channel if you're interested.